Let me recognize the other leaders who are here with me today. Chairman Chris Taliaferro of the Public Safety Committee, his Vice Chair Barry Osterman, Alderman Sawyer, Alderman Ramirez Rosa, Alderwoman Hairston, and Desmond Yancey of the Empowering Communities for Public Safety. Earlier today, a number of measures were passed and introduced during a City Council meeting that will allow our city to take significant steps forward when it comes to rooting equity, inclusion, and transparency at the heart of everything that we do. And let me highlight a few of them. First and foremost, as you can tell from the folks who are gathered here, I'm thrilled to announce and report that the City Council has passed historic legislation that will create a first of its kind independent civilian oversight body for our police department as well as its accountability agencies, the Civilian Office of Police Accountability, or COPA, and the Chicago Police Board. This proposal will help propel our city toward becoming a national leader when it comes to constitutional policing and police reform. And importantly, strikes an important balance of a range of interests and issues, feedback from relevant stakeholders, including aldermen, advocates, experts, and our own residents. Beginning January 1 of next year, we will have a 7-member Civilian Oversight Commission that will be completely made up of Chicago residents, helping ensure full representation. To further ensure full representation, within 60 days after commission members take office, a non-citizen advisory council will be created to advise members on the needs and concerns of our citizen population. In addition, this commission will have the power to do a handful of very important tasks, including assessing the performance of and setting goals for the superintendent, chief administrator of COPA, and the police board president, appointing the COPA chief administrator with the advice and consent of City Council, providing CPD, the police board, COPA, and the public safety inspector general with community feedback relevant to their operations received as a result of the commission's public outreach activities, and much more. In sum, the responsibilities given to this commission will provide our residents with an important opportunity to hold our police department accountable and ensure our elected leaders remain accountable for their role in police oversight. As some of you may remember, I promised on the campaign trail to pave a path for civilian oversight of the Chicago Police Department, which is a necessary step towards building trust between officers and the communities they are sworn to serve and protect. You heard me speak earlier today about legitimacy. There can be no legitimacy if the people of the city do not trust the police, and the police will never be effective in fulfilling their sacred oath to protect and serve if they are not trusted by the community and viewed with suspicion. Today, I'm beyond proud to be able to deliver on that campaign promise, not just for me, but because of all the people who are gathered here and all the people that are represented by the folks that are in this room and those who could not be here with us today. This significant step forward will further ensure that residents from all walks of life have an equal chance to oversee CPD by running for a spot on this commission. I mentioned this before in my remarks on the City Council floor. I had the great privilege of leading the Police Accountability Task Force. And one of the key recommendations of that task force was civilian oversight. We were intentional in not dictating in that report the form and substance of that oversight. We thought it was incredibly important for us as a city to engage in further, more robust engagement of residents around this concept of civilian oversight. I didn't think it would take 6 years plus, but here we are. A long journey, a hard journey. At times, didn't think we were going to get there. But we stand here today because I think all of the folks who had an interest in this topic understood the beauty of compromise. Compromise, unfortunately, in our democracy has become something of a dirty word. Some people feel that it's weakness, but our democracy depends upon compromise, striking the right balances for those things that are important. Not compromising your values or your ideas, but moving forward and making progress on behalf of our residents. And that's what we were able to accomplish today. And I'm proud to be standing with the folks in this room and the folks who worked so hard on this for so many years. I want to thank the folks at Empowering Communities for Public Safety for their collaboration on this initiative, as well as their recommendations to help make up the backbone of this historic proposal. I also have to give tremendous thanks to Chairman Taliaferro, who I think had guided this work through very difficult times, and at times with great personal sacrifice. So Chris, I just want to say thank you. I know what this has meant to you. I know why this is so important to you, and I want to thank you for your leadership. I also want to call out and thank Alderman Osterman and Alderman Sawyer. Some of you may recall way back when, in 2018, that these two aldermen were the first sponsors of the original GAPA ordinance. That really, I thought, this is an interesting pairing at the time. But through a lot of trial and effort, both of these aldermen really lived this work, really spent a tremendous amount of time educating themselves, educating their colleagues, and this, we would not be standing here today without their leadership on this issue, so thank you both. I also want to thank Alderman Leslie Harrison, who's here with us, as well as Carlos Ramirez Rosa. Two other people who were very instrumental in raising this issue, raising our consciousness around the necessity of this moment, being very passionate advocates on behalf of communities and residents. So thank you both for your longstanding support of police reform and accountability, and thank you for really being conscious of the council on this issue. I also want to thank Alderwoman Sophia King, who also has joined in this effort. We also have with us Desmond Yancey, and you'll hear from him in a moment, but I want to thank him for all of his hard work in moving this ship forward through sometimes difficult waters. The second thing that I want to talk about today, which in some ways may pale in comparison, but it's important for those who are affected, and that is the City Council has passed a revised public way use reform substitute ordinance. It shouldn't be this way, that it took so long, and years and years and years, to allow businesses to just get a sign. When I first started hearing about this issue on the campaign trail and hearing small businesses talk about the fact that it would take, in some instances, literally years just to get a sign to say we're open for business, to welcome customers, to advertise for themselves. We now, the passage of the substitute ordinance today, have cut years, certainly months, off the time it takes a business just to get a sign to open up for business. I appreciate the efforts of many. I want to call out and thank Alderwoman Mitz, and I want to thank Alderman Riley for working with us and working with each other to come to a compromise that cuts red tape for our businesses and delivers a final piece of the unprecedented Shy Biz Strong initiative, which is the most comprehensive legislative package our city has seen in years and will significantly improve how we do business and how we support workers, which is needed now more than ever as we're coming out of the pandemic. This revised piece of the Shy Biz Strong initiative will remove the ordinance requirement for the vast majority of public way use permits, and you heard that today from Alderman Riley. And for those of you who don't know, you want a sign? Prior today, you had to get an ordinance. Draft the ordinance, get it introduced into committee, have a committee meeting, and then hope you get to a favorable vote out of the committee, and then get to the city council floor. Absolutely unnecessary burden on our small businesses at a time when we should be shrinking the red tape, not piling it on. So I am extraordinarily pleased that this has moved forward. And again, thanks to Chairman Mitz, thanks to Alderman Brendan Riley, and thanks to Rosa Escarena, our Commissioner of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection, and her team, who really shepherded this.
It has to be his full name because it helps me put that whole thing together. But the mayor talked about earlier a journey, and
that's what this has been. Most folks wanted to put a time frame on this journey, whether it's a year or 2 years. But a journey is sometime that there is no time frame that you can put to it. You just hope that on your path, on your journey, that you can produce the best results that you possibly can. And I think that's one of the things, because of the importance of what we had to do as city council members, and how it would affect our police department in our city. We could not easily and haphazardly end this journey any quicker than what he did. And I think we took careful measures to make sure that every aspect and every rock was turned, and every thought went into the ordinance that was produced and voted on and passed today. And I say that this journey isn't over. It's simply, we've only just met one leg of it, or 2 legs of it. But the end process must be a better city of Chicago. The end process must be a better Chicago Police Department. And that's when the journey somewhat ends there. And then it continues on to not only just completing and having a good police department, or the best in the country, but keeping it at that level. And so I'm honored to have worked with the men and women on the city council to produce this ordinance. And I thank them for their hard work. And we can't go without thanking the members of the coalition. As I said earlier, the hundreds of Desmond Yancey's, and the hundreds of Mr. Chapman, Mr. Frank Chapman, and the hundreds of Adam Grosses that took their time and effort to love upon this city and to love the residents of the city, to produce the best ordinance possible. I think in the end, all of us have the same vision, and this is something our mayor has spoken about very eloquently, and that's reshaping the future of this city, reshaping the future of the Chicago Police Department. And we can't all have that goal in our hearts and have that goal in the forefront of our mind. We fail the residents of this city, and that's something that we all refuse to do. We will make sure that this ordinance is just a stepping stone to building a great foundation to the home that we call the city of Chicago. Thank you so much to all of you guys for letting me be a part of the ordinance that we bring before the people of this city. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Harry Osterman, Alderman of the 48th Ward. Today is a historic day in our city, a day that we are going to take a huge step forward to bringing the communities of Chicago and the police closer together. We did not get into where we are when it comes to violence and the distrust and the chasm between some communities and the police overnight, and we're not going to get out of it overnight. But today, passing this ordinance puts Chicago in the forefront nationally, but more importantly, it brings communities around the city to the table with the police in a more constructive way that will lead us to, I really believe, a safer city. For children that are here now as they grow up, for people that are there out in every corner of the city of Chicago. Today you heard a very thoughtful debate where you saw in very clear terms some differences of how people interact with the police. We want to get to a city that every single neighborhood feels the same way, where every single neighborhood can trust to pick up the phone and call the police and work side by side. When we have that trust, when we have that community working side by side with the police, we will have a safer city, and it will help our city grow. We would not be here without Mayor Lightfoot's leadership. Her longstanding support of these ordinances, but really coming together at this critical time with her staff and bringing people to make it happen was critical. And I want to thank her on behalf of the coalition for her leadership on this issue and getting this over the finish line. Mayor, thank you. I want to thank Chris Taliaferro. Chris is a former police officer, and he brought his dedication and love of Chicago, his experience as an officer, his leadership as an alderman from the west side of the city, to the task of shepherding a very difficult, challenging ordinance through. And trust me when I can tell you that there were many times when this whole thing could have collapsed. But Chris helped us moving forward together. And Chris, I want to thank you for the leadership on this ordinance. You made it happen. There were many aldermen who I really want to thank. Carlos Ramirez Rosa, Leslie Hairston, aldermen like Sophia King, Michelle Smith, Andre Vasquez, Greg Mitchell, many others. Some that even didn't vote for this, their input on this, based on what they saw in their community, helped make this ordinance a balanced, better ordinance. But the coalition of aldermen that came together really worked side by side and really worked to get this over the finish line. This would not have happened unless it was a team effort. But the team effort was grounded in community. The ordinance is grounded in community. And Desmond Yancey, coalitions from the GAPA Coalition, One North Side, the Carper Coalition, many people that have worked on this for decades, this issue, have really brought us closer together. This would not have happened without them. They are on the ground in communities, they've heard the stories. They're also going to be our partners in making sure our city's safer. Lastly, I want to say two things real quick. It's been an honor and a privilege for me to work with Rod Sawyer. We're kind of different ends of the city, but we've been partners on this for a long time, longer than either one of us care to say. But together we've worked with our colleagues and really got this done. And Rod, it was a pleasure to work with you on this. I hope it takes us a quicker time to pass other ordinances in the future. I want to say one last thing, and the mayor brought up the budget coming forward. This is a first step on safety, but we're not going to have a safe city unless we're investing in communities that need support. And that's something that we hope to look at the budget on how to rectify some of the past injustices and disinvestment around our city to make our city whole, where everyone in our city is supported. So today's a great day for our city. It's a step in the right direction, and I'm proud to be with everyone here today. I want to bring up Carlos Ramirez Rosa.
Chicago has enacted the nation's strongest and most progressive civilian oversight ordinance. Let me say that again, because it's historic. Chicago has enacted the nation's strongest and most progressive civilian oversight ordinance. How did we get here? We got here because decades ago, black leaders fed up with misconduct and police violence and unconstitutional and racist policing in their communities made a demand for community control of police. We got here because the previous administration decided to cover up the police killing of LaQuan McDonald. Because 16 shots rang out and people took to the streets to demand justice. We got here because a task force was formed, and under then non-Mayor Lightfoot's leadership, the task force heard the community's demand for civilian oversight and included that recommendation in their final report. In the wake of the news that the murder of LaQuan McDonald had been covered up, I joined with the Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, and together with a lot of organizations and about a dozen aldermen, we introduced the Civilian Police Accountability Council Ordinance. And shortly thereafter, Harry and Rod and One North Side and a bunch of groups got together and they formed the Grassroots Alliance for Police Accountability, and they introduced their own proposal. After a lot of years, we came together because we understood that our city needed to get something done to right the ship on policing. And we compromised. But those compromises were based on a principle that at the heart of transparency, there must be democracy. That democracy is critical to community control of the police. That democracy is critical to restoring trust in our institutions, in our government, and in the services and the departments that are supposed to protect and serve. And after we got together, Mayor Lightfoot came together with us. And I want to thank you, Mayor Lightfoot, for working with the Empowering Communities for Public Safety Coalition to get us the ordinance that was enacted today. That coalition that came together, maybe an unlikely coalition, came together for what's good for the city of Chicago. I want to be clear what this ordinance is and what this ordinance is not, because we have to be truthful, we have to be honest. This ordinance is not defunding the police. This ordinance is not abolishing the police. This ordinance is good government, it's good public policy, it's police reform. It's predicated on the belief that if we can bring police and communities together, if we can ensure that young people have a real voice in the policing that's impacting their lives and impacting their community, if we ensure that communities on the south side and the west side can have a real say in the policing that's impacting their communities, that if we can have democracy, if we can have transparency, if we can have inclusivity, that we will be a safer Chicago. The research backs that up. You can go and do it on your own, or you can talk to Matt and Gross from BPI. He can tell you the research shows that when we restore trust in policing, when we bring that community voice into police departments, our cities become safer. It was on that basis that coalitions also worked with Mayor Lightfoot to pass the Welcoming City Ordinance amendments. So I think we should all be very proud of what our city has accomplished today. As Mayor Lightfoot said, there's so much work left to be done, but this is a great start. This is a firm foundation. And moving forward, we know that we have the wind at our back and that we're moving towards a more just Chicago and a more safe Chicago for everyone. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Roderick Sawyer and I serve as Alderman of the 6th Ward. This is truly an historic day. A day where we can honestly say that we have come together to form something that will bring citizens and the police closer together towards solving unsolved crimes and making our communities safer. It was a long effort. We did not give up. We had 2 paths going that way, as Carlos stated, both with CPAC and then with GAPA, and we persevered. We got to a point where we both felt that we can go further together than we could separately. And we connected, had very intense, sometimes contentious conversations at nights and weekends. We've met scores of times, if I would say so, Adam, and sometimes they were rough. But the end result was, as was stated earlier, the most progressive, the most effective community oversight ordinance in the country. And we're very proud of that. But it's not over. One thing that we will have to have, in addition with crafting the ordinance, is collaboration. We need the police to come forward. We need the community to come forward. When it's time to assemble these district councils, when it's time to form the commissions, we need people to come forward and be present and step up and say enough is enough, and they want to do more for the benefit of the city of Chicago. I just want to thank everyone that was involved in this. Again, I want to thank the GAPA and CARPA groups. We could not have done it without you. My colleagues, Carlos, Ramirez, Rosa. I'm going to get all my full name pronounced one of these days. But Carlos has been a true advocate, a true friend in getting this together. And also my great friend, not just my automatic friend, but my lifelong friend, Leslie Harrison, who started off on the other side, but we were on different sides working together, trying to make this happen. And she knows that I forever appreciate her, and we're glad to be doing this together. And who thought that 2 automatic legacies would come to get together and really work on police oversight, community control. I really want to thank Harry Osterman. I could not have done this, I could not have been a part of this without his involvement. When we first talked about it, we stated that we needed a Northside Alderman that really gets it. And it was immediate who that person was. And it's been a great ride, and I'll forever be grateful for having that experience with Harry, and he's become a true friend and someone that I know I can depend on and work together with in the future. So this is a great ordinance, people, but we have to implement it. Let's get it working. Starting with, once we get the interim commission working, let's get people involved. Let's get that spirit of collaboration together, and let's have a more effective police department. Let's have a more effective community commission, and let's get to have a safer Chicago. And I thank you. And at this time, I want to introduce my good friend, the Alderman of the 5th Ward, Leslie Harrison.
Alderman Sawyer. You know, There's a saying about Chicago, that Chicago ain't ready for reform. Well, today, Chicago is. And you've seen that in what we have introduced today and what we passed today. I remember when I first introduced the ordinance way back in 2016, and it was just me, and I was just standing there. And it was the right thing to do, and it was the right thing to do at that time. But what I didn't have is I didn't have the coalition. I didn't have all of the people. And that's what we have today. We have something that was put together by all of the people, that includes the people. You know, I am very fortunate to represent a ward that is very active. And I would like to acknowledge the Invisible Institute and all of the Fifth Ward residents and the University of Chicago Law School. And of course, my former employee, Desmond Yancey, who have been working on this for years. And, you know, when you see a problem, you try to find a way to fix it. And you may have the best idea in the world, but if you don't have a support system behind you, it goes nowhere. And so, over the years, we have come together. We have come together with Alderman Sawyer and Alderman Osterman, and Alderman, I'm not gonna say, Ramirez Rosa. I'm gonna leave out one name. And we have gotten something that we are actually proud of. Alderman Talaferro, you have mostly been a good leader. You know, sometimes being the lady of the bunch, you have to kind of get in there and scrap with the guys. And so, you know, you've handled that well. But you have been generous. And so I thank you for your patience. I thank you for your time. And Mayor Lightfoot, thank you for keeping your word. It is more important now than ever that those of us that are in the public eye not just say what we want to say, but actually back it up and make our word worth something. In today's society where we've got real news, fake news, we've got everything. It is important that the people that we serve have our trust, and that they can trust what we say. And when it came down to it, you were there, your team was there, and it wasn't in a room, but we got it done. And I think this is something that can make all of us proud. When we engage the people that we represent, we have a better product, we have a better city, we have a safer city. And when we work together with the police and the community, which I think was the idea behind community policing, but we somewhere along the line didn't get there, and we have to rely. You hear on the news every day, well, you know, such and such happened, there was this incident that happened, but nobody's talking. I talk to my commanders every day. Anytime there's an incident, yeah, they were shot, they're, you know, one step before death, and they are not talking. And everybody in the community is talking. They're talking in the barber shops, they're talking in the nail salons, they're talking in the beauty shops, but they're not talking to the police. And so I think this will help facilitate a better working relationship, and that's what we're supposed to be doing. Thank you.
In December of 2009, my friend Alvin Nash was having a mental health crisis. And in an abundance of caution, his family called 911. Minutes later, the police arrived, and shortly after, on Christmas Eve, Alvin, who was a U.S. Naval veteran and a union organizer, was killed in front of his wife and son. 6 years later, in December of 2015, Antonio LeGree was having a mental health crisis and called 911 for help. Minutes later, the police arrived, and shortly after, the day after Christmas, Antonio and his downstairs neighbor Betty Jones lay dead, killed in the Hill Police Building. But the moment that brought us here was the videotaped murder and subsequent cover-up of requirement conduct.
This moment put the city on a trajectory that has us here today. Many people were surprised to see this brazen and senseless behavior from the Chicago Police Department, but for many in this city, this was just a reminder of the need for something different. Something substantive to prevent something like this from happening again. Something needed to be done so that all the citizens of this city felt safe. So the roots of this ordinance has never been anti-police. It's always been about making sure that all residents of all communities feel safe, building trust and making communities safe for each and every one of us. But conversations about police reform are challenging, and the stakes are high. So it's important to keep the conversation rooted as much as possible in some shared principles and some shared understandings. First, when we talk about policing and police reform, we should always keep in the front of our minds that what we really care about is public safety. We want everyone, civilians and police officers. My father was a police officer for 39 years here in this city. We want them all to go home at night, at the end of the day, and be safe, and work at work, and in their homes and in their communities. We might feel differently about how we achieve these goals, but it is important to know that we all share these goals and that we need to work together to advance them. Second, if we want to increase public safety, there's nothing more important than building trust. Trust isn't just important because it makes us feel good, it's important because it keeps us safe. There's less crime and violence in communities where there's more trust in the police department. So when we talk about any particular police reform and we talk about increasing public safety, we should always ask whether a particular approach is likely to increase or decrease trust. More than anything else, that's what's missing now. And more than anything else, this is what we need. So today, I am so grateful for the people that made this passage of this ordinance possible. This victory, very much like this ordinance, is deeply rooted in community and is a victory for all of Chicago. But this work is only the beginning. We still have to work together to build the commission and district councils in order to bring the change necessary to make this transformation real. In order to bring real safety to all Chicago residents. So first, I want to thank the coalition, the Empowering Communities for Public Safety Coalition, which came together to do this important and difficult work. If it weren't for the hundreds of thousands of residents that supported this movement and created the moral and political climate to make this ordinance possible, we wouldn't be here. I'm especially grateful for the youth who have fled the streets since that day in 2015 to make sure that this change would come to this broken system. Next, I'd like to thank our courageous sponsors, my alderperson, Leslie Harris, I'm gonna say the whole thing. Alderman Roderick Sawyer, Alderman Harry Osterman, and Alderman Carlos Ramirez. Thank you all for standing with us in this way. And Chairman Talia Thor, your leadership on this mission since the beginning has been instrumental. I'd also like to thank Alderpersons Taylor, King, Vasquez, Martin, Urban, and Haddon for your counsel as we work to craft this ordinance. And lastly, I want to thank Mayor Lightfoot for administration, who worked tirelessly over the weekend to bring this to fruition. And though our path was not one without difficulty, it is one that has brought us to the conclusion today. So again, I'm thankful and grateful. Thank you.
Before I take questions, let me also add a few more things. As has been alluded to, it was a long weekend. It was a long journey, but a particularly long weekend. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, hours and hours of conversations back and forth, caucusing to get this thing done. And on my team, I want to particularly thank Manny Perez, the head of our intergovernmental affairs, who shuttle diplomacy really was, I think, a big deciding factor in moving this forward. I also want to thank my friend, Maurice Clausen, my former chief of staff. Maurice, somebody I met through the Police Accountability Task Force. As I mentioned earlier, he was the principal architect of the section of the report that dealt with civilian oversight. From his role at MacArthur, he was a huge push to get the groups that became GAPA funded, and then as chief of staff worked tirelessly to get this moving forward. And one of his last acts was to help draft an ordinance that we introduced. So a big thanks to him. This day would not have been possible without his contributions going back many years. And again, just grateful to everyone who's here, grateful for our city. You know, when we talk about diplomacy, We talk a lot about confidence building measures and how we can send messages and signals to those that we're trying to reach, that we hear them and that we see them. I think today was a big step forward in doing just that. For the communities that needed to be heard, who demanded a voice and a seat at the table, today is a big step forward. But I also want to say this to the men and women of the Chicago Police Department. We hear you, and we see you, and we respect you. There's been conversations that suggested that they would go, that they wouldn't work hard, that they would feel like they were under siege. Ladies and gentlemen, this is probably the toughest time in the history of our country for policing. Make no mistake about it. But every single day, our fearless men and women of the Chicago Police Department are working their tails off. They've taken over 6,300 guns off the streets already this year. They are on pace to set another record in illegal gun recoveries, double what New York or LA combined will do in the course of the year. They're doing this under very difficult circumstances, going into neighborhoods where there isn't a lot of trust. They're not viewed as legitimate, but they still do their job. Our homicide clearance rate, as many of you know, was shameful in the teens not that long ago. This year, it keeps inching up and over 50%. We're not satisfied, we need to get further, but now we're in the conversation on national standards, whereas before we were a pariah when it came to actually solving homicides. So there's a lot of good work that's being done, and we've got to do it together. This act today isn't about taking over the police department, defunding the police. It's none of that. You've heard that, I think, from the sponsors. But it is about building that legitimacy and trust so that everyone can move forward and that every community can be safer. So with that, I'm happy to take questions or questions from any members of the...
Madam Mayor, you talked
Wait,
about...
Mayor, 1 second, 2 questions, we're starting with Craig.
Mayor,
We'll go back to you.
obviously, this looks really good going forward. How is the civilian oversight can actually manifest itself in making police more accountable? How do you see that actually playing out? I know we're talking about building relationships, but how does that play out for greater accountability?
Well, I'll start in and I'll invite any of the others to follow on. I think that, for me, the most important